Hello and welcome to the Marcus Williams Training Academy Title IX training program. This program is made up of 5 courses, 5 lessons, and 2 ebooks. These lessons are designed to help you build a foundation upon which to build your program and your training and your experience. This course is appropriate for anyone in the Title IX world, from the Title IX coordinator up to the president of the university. But it is specifically designed and tailored for your investigators, your decision makers, and your advisors. Those who are actually involved in the Title IX investigation and decision-making process. We are going to start today with a lesson on biased investigations. Bias is one of the topics specifically mentioned by the Department of Education, something that everyone needs to be aware of and trained on, and that's why we're going to start with that. But first, let me introduce myself and talk a little bit about why and how this course came into being. My name is Marcus Williams, and I spent the majority of my career in law enforcement as a police officer at the Pentagon, but then the majority of that time, I was a special agent with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. And as an agent, we investigated felony crimes that impacted the Department of the Navy, so the Navy or the Marine Corps. So wherever in the world there was a sailor or Marine, we were there. And I had the privilege of serving all over the United States, in Europe, and in Asia. I investigated every type of felony crime, from narcotics, doing drug buys and drug operations, to death cases involving homicides. But during the course of my career, I became a specialist in sexual violence, in family and sexual violence investigations. And the majority of my advanced training and experience has been in sexual misconduct or sex crimes. After NCIS, I went to work as the deputy Title IX coordinator at Brigham Young University, where I was the primary investigator for all student cases. BYU Provo is a very large campus. There's over 30,000 students. So as the primary and most times only investigator over student cases, that was a lot of cases. I was very busy, and it was important that I had a good foundation in investigations and also built a very efficient, thorough, and consistent process that I could follow to keep up with my cases. So the first thing that I did, even though I had a lot of experience in investigations, the first thing, in fact, it was the first week that I was at BYU, I went to training so that I could learn how to put my experience, my foundation in investigations into the Title IX world. I wanted to learn Title IX regulations and compliance issues and laws and how all of that fit, how I could conduct these administrative investigations. Because I was used to having a badge, to having legal authority as law enforcement. So I went to this training that was designed for new Title IX investigators. And this room was full, hundreds of people. Very large room was full of people of all different experiences and background. And I came to realize a few things as I was at this training. First is I realized there is no well-designed career path to become a Title IX investigator. There are no steps that you can take from college that would specifically lead to that role. So the room was full of people from all different backgrounds. There were advocates, EEO, student conduct, lawyers, former law enforcement, and higher ed administrators. And I'm sure there were many more. Some of those are more related than others. Some of those give you better experience than others. But during this training, where a lot of good information was presented, they were giving people tools. They were giving people techniques in how to investigate. And it wasn't until towards the end of the training where a woman raised her hand and asked what I consider to be a very basic question. And that was my first reaction. This is easy. Then I had to step back and realize I've been doing this for a long time. What does this mean? That someone who has now been through this training designed for new Title IX investigators, who still has a very basic question regarding investigations. And I realized that the majority of the people in the room had no foundation. They were getting and receiving all of this new information, these new techniques, and didn't have anywhere to put them because they had no foundational knowledge of what an investigation should look like. And so I thought back, let's go back in time to my training. When I started with NCIS, I attended it was about 4 months long, and it was a residential training. So I lived at the academy for 4 months, and for the majority of that 4 months, we were going to class 6 days a week. So all day, every day, weekends, and many evenings. It was a full-time course. Now, obviously, we learned other law enforcement skills, defense tactics, arrests, driving, firearms, those kind of things. But the vast majority of that 4 months was spent learning the fundamentals of investigations. These people in the Title IX world, we were expected to gain that same body of knowledge in 3 or 4 days. That foundation of knowledge that I received at the academy helped me do investigations in all of the different disciplines. I received extra training in death cases, and I could work a homicide case. I could work a narcotics case. I could work a theft case. I could work sex crimes. But then as I went through my career, I didn't just depend on that basic training. I then went to advanced training. I went to conferences. I worked with expert colleagues. And my training didn't stop at the academy. After the academy, I went back to the office where I was paired up with a field training agent. And for months, that agent helped in everything I did, walked me through the process and planning my investigations to ensure that I was taking what I learned in the academy and applying those skills correctly. How many of you, in Title IX, attend your short week-long training and then go back to the office and have a field training investigator in your office that helps and mentors you? Probably very few of you. And of those of you who do, what kind of training or background did your mentor have? Did your mentor just go through the same week-long training that you did just a couple years earlier than you did? So as I worked with Title IX and I talked to other investigators at other schools, and I designed trainings for other schools and trainings for my colleagues, and I read stories online about failures in Title IX investigations. I realized that this was a nationwide issue. This was a problem, this lack of foundational training. If you walk into investigations and your only experience is what you've seen on TV and what you've read in books, your employer is doing you a disservice. They're throwing you into a job without giving you the tools to do so. In what other positions would we do that? We wouldn't throw someone into an operating room and say, okay, conduct surgery without them going through medical school and surgical training. But we do that with investigations all the time. Investigations is a skill that you have to learn. You have to be trained, and then you have to practice the good skills that you learn to get experience and to become better. It's not something that just anyone could do. And so I started looking, and I found that many schools, in order to kind of solve that problem, when they put out a job announcement for a Title IX investigator, they put the prerequisite that the person had a law degree. Now, that's great in many respects. A law degree brings a lot to the table and a lot of training, extra education, legal experience, a legal understanding, but not investigations. A law degree does not provide investigations training. They provide similar, related learning, but not specific to investigations, and especially not specific to sexual misconduct investigations. Again, back in my basic academy, there were lawyers in my class. They didn't get to opt out from the class because they had a law degree. They still needed to learn those foundational skills. And I recognize that this was an issue in the corporate world as well. Human resources professionals and managers are assigned to do these investigations without any training, without any foundation. And so that's why I developed the Williams Consulting Group. And as part of that, the Marcus Williams Training Academy, to help you build your house upon the rock. Currently, you're building your house upon the sand. Without the foundation, you can learn a lot of skills, a lot of techniques, but you have nowhere to put them unless you have a solid foundation. This isn't a 4-month course, so I recognize that, but I'm trying to focus on topics and things that will help you build that foundation that are applicable to everything that you do as an investigator and as a decision maker. So that is what this course is designed to do. And we're starting with biased investigations because that's such a foundational principle. It is such a big deal, especially in the Title IX world, where there have been a lot of court cases, there have been a lot of successful lawsuits claiming bias. And we rake the schools through the coals and everyone is very critical of it, but it still comes back to a training issue. That bias existed because nobody ever taught the investigator how to do an investigation without bias. Nobody ever taught the school or the investigator or the decision maker what bias actually means, what elements have to be present in order for an investigation to be considered biased. So in order to really dive into that, we need to start at the very beginning. We need to start at the definition of bias. Essentially, it's an inclination or outlook or a prejudiced outlook. It is a preconceived opinion or prejudice, and that's very simple. That's all it is. So if you've been doing this for very long, you have most likely been accused of bias by someone. What I've found happens is because not only is there a lack of experience and knowledge on the investigator's side, but also the students don't understand what bias is. They don't understand an investigation. They don't understand a process. How is this different than a law enforcement case? It's confusing. So when someone is unhappy with the outcome, someone is angry at what happened, they will accuse you of bias. So if you've been doing this a while, you have been accused of bias, whether formally in a complaint or just someone talking about you. And when they do that, they attach other words that carry a lot of weight, carry a lot of negative weight, so isms and ists. They start saying you are biased because you are racist or sexist or misogynist or on and on and on. Nobody wants to be called those things. Nobody wants to be labeled those things. And your schools definitely don't want to be labeled as hiring someone who has an ist or an ism. So these are very serious words, easily said, more difficult to take back. And they go viral. They gain traction. People start to believe them, even though there's no evidence or information to back it up. And so we want to avoid it. So as soon as someone yells the word bias, we have this tendency to want to react and retract and go back and change things or fix it. We have to understand if it actually is biased. Is that accusation true? So does that definition apply to investigations? And the answer to that question is yes, but only in part. Because it's only half of the equation. There has to be something else. In order for an investigation or a process to be biased, there has to be some sort of action in furtherance of that prejudice. Something else had to have occurred or been done in order to make that entire process biased. So the closest we can come to that, even though this is an administrative case, it does carry legal implications, and it's a quasi-legal process, an investigation. So let's turn to the legal definition of bias. That's two parts. You've got your predisposition or preconceived opinion, so your simple definition of bias that prevents, here's your action, a person from impartially evaluating the facts. So that simple definition, that bias has to prevent impartial evaluation of the fact. And then Black's Law Dictionary says it in a different way, but it essentially means the same thing. It's a predisposition, or you've already made up your mind. And so your mind, you're not open to different opinions. You're not open to allowing the evidence to sway your opinion or change your mind. So both of these are two-part definitions.